We're gonna die, Bud. They're gonna leave us here to die.
Take it easy, Charlie. My foot's on the rail.
Think of a movie line that became a hit despite being an unexpected turn of events. What if an unintentional slip-up became the film's most memorable scene? The iconic Western Blazing Saddles depicts this same event. Occasionally, serendipity yields the most delightful results. Why did this blunder gain so much traction, and how did it come to pass? Was it just chance, or was that instant unique? We may go into the story of how this surprising event became famous. A character who seemingly strolled into one of the best comedic moments ever is featured in it. If you've seen Blazing Saddles, it's probable that you won't soon forget it. The great Mel Brooks directed Blazing Saddles, which was released in 1974, and it deviated from the typical script writing, rehearsing, and planning process. Part of its uniqueness comes from the fact that its production was unconventional for its period. See, Mel Brooks was the kind of director who reveled in giving his actors lines to play with. He pushed his actors to think outside the box rather than follow the script word for word. Big studio films of the day nearly never allowed performers to improvise or come up with their own lines. However, Brooks had faith in his performers' abilities and allowed them creative license to embody the roles with their own brand of wit and charisma. A film that was new, unscripted, and hilariously entertaining was the fruit of this creative freedom. Blazing Saddles broke all sorts of norms, which contributed to its massive success. Despite its weighty subject matter, racism, and inclusion, it managed to unite audiences via humor. Some moments and quips in the film were so outrageous that they surprised both viewers and reviewers, adding fuel to the fire of controversy. Blazing Saddles didn't go down because it dared to be risky. On the contrary, it gained popularity. Many enjoyed the film for its daring and humorous moments despite the fact that others felt it went too far. I had Final Cut, so the studio actually couldn't legally trim it. They couldn't cut anything, but I had filmed something, and when I saw it, I got scared. One of the most intriguing aspects of Blazing Saddles is how, despite discussing serious issues, it managed to connect with such a diverse audience. In doing so, it managed to include viewers from all walks of life in the joke. It demonstrated the potency of well-executed humor, which was unusual in the 1970s. Because of his own vision and method of filming, Mel Brooks was able to produce an iconic work of art. The film Blazing Saddles made a message rather than just entertaining. You could make people laugh and think at the same time, it proved. Despite the negative buzz, the film was a financial success, proving that risk-taking pays off. Ultimately, Blazing Saddles became a movie that everyone speaks about, and not just because of its comedic moments, but also because it challenged the norms of filmmaking. Many people still quote and mention it now, and it went on to become one of the best comedies ever. Even while Blazing Saddles is most known as a humorous Western spoof, the tale is really rather complex. It was a groundbreaking picture that changed the way people saw movies and the way studios made movies. The true genius of Mel Brooks's Blazing Saddles lies in his audacious handling of delicate subjects and his readiness to allow his actors artistic freedom. If I said to myself, what are the critics going to think about this? I never would have had the guts to do all of the outrageous foolishness I did with Blazing Saddles. Some individuals believed Blazing Saddles was too much, thus the movie almost didn't happen. Too dirty for John Wayne, the renowned actor famed for his Western performances, to be in the film. Then Warner Brothers chairman Ted Ashley went so far as to call it disgusting and vulgar, and threatened to kill the project if it ever got made. The director, Mel Brooks, however, would have none of it. He was adamant about the film and refused to make any alterations. Blazing Saddles was a smashing success when it debuted in cinemas, so his perseverance paid off. To top it all off, Brooks dubbed it the funniest motion picture ever. The production of Blazing Saddles was accompanied by an equally untamed creative process. Andrew Bergman, a young screenwriter, was the one who began it all in 1972. A film about a black sheriff called Bart who rescues a racist community from a rapacious developer, and his goons was his brainchild. The initial title of the film was Tex, and Bergman penned a 30-page script for it shortly after completing his doctorate in American film history. After that, Warner Brothers reached out to Mel Brooks, who was 46 years old, to adapt Bergman's screenplay. Because of his unemployment and other financial difficulties, Brooks was not in a good position. Despite the positive reviews for his last film, The Producers, he was desperate for work since his wife, Anne, was expecting their first child. In Williamsburg, New York, Brooks had grown up watching classic westerns, so he leaped at the opportunity to write and direct what he referred to as the wackiest, most insane movie ever made. His goal was to create a film that parodied racism and the genre in general. Brooks adored westerns when he was a kid. He saw the depictions of wide-open landscapes and aggressive guys in the media. Along with his co-workers on Your Show of Shows, he had previously parodied westerns, particularly Shane, a film about a lone guy who arrives in town, fixes everything, and then disappears. The influence of westerns was not lost on Brooks, a television producer. Gunsmoke and Bonanza were huge hits and seemed certain to air indefinitely. However, Brooks had a different take on westerns than the general public. Many saw them as tales of justice and morality, but Brooks, who was Jewish, observed who wasn't in them. Minorities were underrepresented in westerns, and he aimed to rectify this with Blazing Saddles. An indication of the film's subject matter is provided by its initial title, Black Bart, a black guy in a genre that typically featured white protagonists. It was Brooks's decision to turn the film into a comedy rather than a serious sermon about racism. He shed light on a prevalent kind of racism in the United States by doing so. Unlike the simplistic protagonists of previous films, Blazing Saddles' characters have depth and humanity. Brooks made a film with flawed characters instead of uncomplicated ones, which made it humorous and made you think. Blazing Saddles takes place in the American Old West, in the made-up town of Rock Ridge, and follows Harvey Korman's, the character's scheme to have the town's residents uprooted so a new railroad may be built. Lamar, hoping that the bigoted locals would reject him, installs Bart, a black railroad worker, as the new sheriff. Cleveland Little plays the role, but Bart's charisma, humor, and intellect swiftly win over the villagers, and he enlists Gene Wilder's intoxicated gunslinger Jim to help him foil Lamar's plot and save Rock Ridge. Comedian Mel Brooks, whose work includes groundbreaking satire and irreverent comedy, was the mastermind of Blazing Saddles. "I kept saying to Richard, 'Can we use the N-word here?' he said. He said, 'Absolutely, you must.'" Mel Brooks was the team captain, while Alan Uger, Bergman, Norman Steinberg, and comic Richard Pryor were writing members. Mel Brooks held Richard Pryor in high regard, calling him the greatest stand-up comedian who ever lived. Despite this, Pryor had a troubled upbringing and battled alcoholism. Brooks playfully rebuffed Pryor's offer during a writing session, claiming he never ate anything before noon. Studios like Warner Brothers were aware of Pryor's usage and were against casting him as the film's protagonist, Bart, a black sheriff. This prompted Pryor and Brooks to look for a new actor. They tried out over 100 actors before they discovered Cleveland Little, a gifted Broadway performer. When asked about Cleveland's casting, Brooks gushed over him, calling him this beautiful, sculptured, laid-back man. Pryor, in his own words, said that the racists in the movie's town would be shocked by Cleveland's dark complexion. Pryor pushed that the screenplay include racist obscenities, particularly the N-word, despite the discomfort of the white writers on the team, in order to demonstrate the reality of prejudice. He was under the impression that the black sheriff's triumph would be amplified by his use of such strong rhetoric. To Pryor, it was critical to highlight the story's overt bigotry. A revolutionary parody of racism was born from Pryor's imposition of those notions. A smart Bart skillfully exposed the racist's ignorance. A chain gang boss wants a classic work song, so the sheriff and his black employees sing, "I Get No Kick from Champagne." The white cowboys get into a ridiculous dance routine to Dixie. Bart manages to get away from the townsfolk who want to shoot him by pretending to be a surreal hostage situation while holding a gun to his throat. "Oh, baby, you're so talented and they are so dumb," says he. Hold it, the next man makes a move, gets it. But the most unnerving part is when Bart encounters a Rock Ridge resident, the kind of charming old woman with a bonnet on her head who represents the West stereotype, and she screams, "Up yours," at him. "These people are the common clay of the New West, you know, morons." Jim the Waco Kid, Bart's inebriated gunslinger deputy, notices his disheartened expression and remarks, "That line always got the biggest laugh from moviegoers who were sampling the big screen's first interracial buddy comedy," according to Brooks. You may be surprised to hear that Blazing Saddles almost used an entirely different ensemble. It's hard to fathom now, but the beloved film of today may have taken a very different path. An important factor in the film's popularity was the performance of the Waco Kid. The role of the Waco Kid, a gunslinger who has seen better days, is comedic, but for the gags to land, the actor had to show genuine feeling. As a rough-and-tumble cowboy who had fallen on hard times due to alcoholism, the portrayal had to be convincing. Mel Brooks, the film's writer and director, was aware that casting this part would be difficult. Gene Wilder, his buddy and a brilliant actor from the producers, truly wanted to portray the role of the Waco Kid, but Brooks felt that Gene was too youthful and unsuited for the role. Someone more mature, with the appearance of having weathered the storms of life, was what he was after. Initially, the part was extended by Brooks to the renowned cowboy actor John Wayne. The screenplay was good, but Wayne felt it was too crude for his reputation. Next, Brooks thought of Dan Daly, but the actor was too elderly to play the role. Gig Young, an actor with experience in a comparable role, was his last casting choice. The reality of Gig Young's personal troubles became apparent nevertheless during shooting. He became too ill to continue working in one scene, and Brooks was forced to let him leave. Despite his reservations about Gene Wilder's youth, Brooks cast him in the part because he had no other choice. In contrast, Gene disproved all expectations. The next Monday, he showed up to the set prepared and had a spectacular performance right out of the gate without having had any prior preparation. You've got to remember that these are just simple farmers. These are people of the land, the common clay of the New West, according to him. Not only was Wilder one of the most memorable characters due to his outstanding performance during rehearsal, but he is also a major contributor to the film's status as a cult classic. Plus, his actions were spontaneous. Neither the joyously lowbrow moments nor the riotous, large-scale comedy set pieces in Blazing Saddles serve as its defining scene. The sequence between Sheriff Bart, Cleavon Little, and the Waco Kid, Gene Wilder, is a throwaway, according to director Mel Brooks. The first black sheriff in the Old West, Bart, has attempted to reach out to the people but has been insulted harshly. The community is bigoted and white. As he sits there in stunned silence, the kid attempts to cheer him up. You can see Little is struggling to hold it together as Wilder goes through the lines because he says, "You've got to remember that these are just simple farmers. These are people of the land, the common clay of the New West, you know, morons." As soon as the laughing breaks out, which was obviously not intended to, you know it's a blown take. Thanks to Wilder's last look as if to inquire, "Are we keeping this?" They did, and that moment served as the scene's heartwarming inspiration for Blazing Saddles. "Could you tell me what occurred? She went so far as to sue us for using the name Hedy Lamarr too closely to her own, and our response was, 'This is ridiculous. We'll go to court. We'll fight her.'" Mel Brooks's unanticipated legal troubles stem from Blazing Saddles. Famous actress Hedy Lamarr sued Mel Brooks, who was already well known for his work as a director, writer, and actor. Anger was directed against the actual Hedy Lamarr by the film's antagonist, Hedley Lamarr. In his 2017 documentary Bombshell, The Hedy Lamarr Story, Mel Brooks discussed this litigation. Originally, the villain's name was going to be Simon Lamarr, but Brooks changed it to Hedley Lamarr. With the brilliant Harvey Korman in the lead, he believed it would be hilarious. Because Lamarr may not pay attention or care, in Brooks's opinion the name wouldn't be an issue. Hedy Lamarr's $10 million lawsuit against Brooks was headline news because of the film's success and his already famous status. She said that her name was utilized in the film without her consent. A lot of people were talking about the case because of the headline. Right here, Miss Lamar, is where we run into the quicksand. After deciding not to fight the claim too aggressively, Brooks chose to settle ultimately. It is unclear, however, how much money Hedy Lamar really got. Since Brooks said she would pay within reason, it's safe to assume she didn't get the advertised $10 million. Funny and unforgettable scenes were also included in the film. One was the character portrayed by Alex Karras, a former football player and a massive thug with lines like, "Don't shoot him, it will just make him mad." Another famous quote from him was, "Only pawn in game of life." The most iconic scene involving Mongo was when he punched a horse, causing it to fall. Sid Caesar, a comedian, suggested this sequence to Brooks. The sequence was inspired by a story Caesar told Brooks about hitting a horse. Despite the horse's fall safety training, the film nonetheless garnered over 1,000 messages of criticism from animal rights activists. "You can't park that animal over there, it's illegal." Despite the fact that it was 1974, Brooks was nonetheless aware that he was entering unfamiliar and potentially offensive ground. There are many instances of the N-word and other racist epithets throughout the film. He looked to Richard Pryor, who was also involved in writing the screenplay, for direction. "I warned Richard that it might be a little dangerous here," Brooks recalled, "and every time I asked him, 'Can I use the N-word here?'" The executives at Warner Brothers didn't laugh much during the initial showing. Dr. John C. ran the film studio as he chuckled. Brooks was concerned that Warner Brothers may hide the movie and never show it to the public. However, it obtained theatrical distribution and went on to become a massive hit. That was Blazing Saddles figured it out, according to Brooks. It was the truth, and everybody raised the flag. They raised the flag and said, "We love it. We're going to see this movie over and over again." They did indeed. There is, however, some history behind this. The filmmaker warned that the 1974 mentality of Warner Brothers executives was perilous, since it led them to see the picture through the lens of the N-word, the marriage, and the shattering of the fourth wall at the conclusion. The 8 other men, all of whom were high-ranking executives at Warner Brothers, said nothing more than, "Ooh, whoa, holy, what are we going to do? Oh my God!" When I asked them to do anything I wanted, they continued to tell me, "Don't do the gay scene, don't break through the walls and do the gay scene, you're crossing a line there." I responded, "Don't be silly." That was about it. Hollywood heavy hitters were not amused with Blazing Saddles at first viewing. Some distributors sought rewrites, while one flat out said they should bury it. Unfortunately, Final Cut was part of Brooks's contract, and he was adamant about not making any modifications. According to Brooks, "I got Final Cut on the producers, and I wouldn't do any movie unless I got Final Cut, because I knew even on the producers, even with Final Cut, I had big fights with the studio. They wanted to change 100 things. They wanted to cut out Hitler. Could you imagine cutting out Hitler? There's no movie. Hitler is the driving force that makes the movie work." The company decided to test the picture in 3 locations, New York City, Los Angeles, and Chicago, on February 7, 1974. They thought those 3 areas would be the most receptive to Brooks's Borscht Belt comedy. Though they were critical, even the worst critics had to admit that the crowds were going wild. Probably more people have commented, "That movie could never be made today," in reference to Blazing Saddles than any other film. What is he saying? The sheriff is near. The outrageous gags on racism and other delicate subjects in Mel Brooks's 1974 comedy made it famous. The N-word, racist jokes, and LGBT stereotypes abound throughout it, all meant to be humorous. Characters fart for more than a minute in one scenario. Could Blazing Saddles be recreated in the year 2024? Even Mel Brooks disagrees. In 2016, when questioned, Brooks said, "I don't think so, no." He thinks some bits, like the fart scene around the campfire, would be okay, but the frequent usage of the N-word is unacceptable now. One of the best parodies of racism in classic westerns is Blazing Saddles. It has witty routines, references to vintage cartoons and shows like High Noon, and brilliant quips. However, rather than a condemnation of racism, some of its comedic elements, such as the use of slurs, may be seen as a bad aspect of a bygone, less progressive age. Blazing Saddles was one of the titles that Brooks considered before deciding on Tex and Black Bart. Despite his wife's disapproval, he settled on Blazing Saddles because he believed it sounded adventurous and Western. The 26 clips that Brooks presented to the executives at Warner Brothers wanted to remove included racist insults, a horse hitting another horse, and farting. Even though he may lose his job or be sued, Brooks refused and maintained the film in its original form. The outrageousness of the picture drove Warner's office personnel insane, but co-writer Norman Steinberg recalls that Brooks held firm in his work. 3 Oscar nominations were extended to Blazing Saddles, including one for Mel Brooks for Best Supporting Actor, despite the film's initial lack of accolades. Though it was not nominated for an Academy Award, the Writers Guild of America did bestow the title of Best Original Screenplay onto it. Because of its cultural importance, the film was also added to the National Film Registry in 2006. The offbeat dialogue and situations in Blazing Saddles will stick with you even if you've never seen the film. Although it raises eyebrows, the film manages to make us chuckle and breaks new ground. The film was commercially successful and continues to draw audiences even after all these years, despite the fact that it dealt with sensitive topics. Blazing Saddles demonstrates ultimately that there are instances when pushing boundaries is beneficial. We may remember it for a long time because of its influence and the fact that people are still talking about it.